Hi, everybody. Paul Gray here, visiting with you about the really good news from God. P.S. There is no bad news. Most everybody, especially religious people, believe that people are not right with God. Most people, especially religious people, believe that they themselves are not right with God. Those who believe that also believe that if they just did enough, just did the right things, that they could get right with God, but of course they'd have to work like the devil to stay right with God and not have much fun doing it. Well, today we're going to start looking this year at a little piece each day of the good news that is already true for you and for everyone. A guy named Paul wrote 2/3 of the Christian scriptures. And God actually took him up to heaven for a while and showed him the truth about the way things really are. It blew his mind. Then 2,000 years ago, when this guy lived, he wrote a letter to a bunch of confused religious people in Rome. And he told them this. He said, by the free gift of God's grace, all are put right with God through Jesus Christ, who sets them free. Another way of reading that, different translation of the language of that day, says this: all people are justified and made upright and in right standing with God freely and gratuitously by God's grace, his unmerited favor and mercy through the redemption which is provided in Christ Jesus. Now, a lot of religious people, and maybe even not so religious people, are familiar with the sentence that actually comes right before that. It's Romans chapter 3, verse 23. It says this: all people have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Well, unfortunately, well-meaning but very misinformed Christian people have taken that verse and just blasted other people and then scared them into believing that there's something they need to do or God's going to make them pay forever because they're not right with him. It's not true. That's part of the good news. Have you ever heard anybody teach on everybody is already right with God? Haven't heard many messages on that, have you? Well, you're hearing one today, and a short one too, and we're not even going to take an offering. You have been made right with God. You have been made right with God. Your spouse has been made right with God. Your kids and your parents have been made right with God. Your neighbors have been made right with God. That hard to work with person at the office, been made right with God. That outspoken member of the opposite political party, already been made right with God. That person who looks and speaks and acts differently than you do, already been made right with God. Those people of different sexual preferences than you, already been made right with God. Now, if you're thinking, well, that's just not right, then you know what that other person is thinking about you. They're thinking, that's just not right. They're different than me. But fortunately, God doesn't deal with what we think is right and wrong. God deals with what he says. And he says we are all already right with him because he made it so. We're going to take several days and look at all the treasures that every one of us already has. And as we come to believe these truths, you'll find that these will totally change how you see God, how you see yourself, and how you see all other people. And as a result, I can tell you, you'll have less stress, less worry, less feeling like you have to perform the right way to be right with God. You'll be a lot less critical of yourself and other people. You'll be happier and feel lighter and free. Things will start to make sense. Now, here's how to get the most of our time together. Practice several times saying, I have been made permanently right with God, and everyone else has been made permanently right with God. Just write that down and say it throughout the day. I have been made permanently right with God, and everyone else has been made permanently right with God. This is the really good news from God. P.S. There is no bad news. Paul Gray saying, see you next time.